Imagine declaring war on the British Empire at 9:02 a.m. and surrendering at 9:40 a.m. the same morning. That's exactly what happened on August 27, 1896, when the Sultan of Zanzibar made the most catastrophically short-sighted military decision in human history. This is the story of the Anglo-Zanzibar War, a conflict so brief, so one-sided, and so absolutely bonkers that it holds the Guinness World Record as the shortest war ever fought. And before we dive into this 38-minute masterclass in military miscalculation, I'm your host here at the Griot Chronicles, where we uncover the wildest, most unbelievable stories that history tried to hide. If you're ready to have your mind blown by true events that are stranger than fiction, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. To understand how a war could last less time than your morning shower, we need to travel back to the East African island of Zanzibar in 1896. Picture this, a tropical paradise off the coast of what's now Tanzania. But beneath the swaying palm trees and pristine beaches lay a dark secret that made Zanzibar incredibly wealthy. It was the heart of the East African slave trade. The British Empire, in their typical fashion, had swooped in and made Zanzibar a protectorate. But here's the catch. They allowed the Sultan to keep his throne as long as he played nice and followed British rules. Think of it as being the king of your own house, but your neighbour gets to decide what you have for dinner. Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini was the perfect puppet ruler. Pro-British, cooperative, and most importantly for the British, he was gradually working to end the slave trade that was making Zanzibar rich, but giving the British a public relations nightmare. Then, on August 25th, 1896, everything went sideways. Sultan Hamad suddenly dropped dead. Now, when I say suddenly, I mean suddenly. One day he's fine, the next day he's pushing up daisies, and everyone's whispering the same word. Poison. The prime suspect, his own nephew, Khalid bin Bargash. This guy had been living in exile after previously trying to seize power, and now he saw his chance. Within hours of his uncle's mysterious death, Khalid marched straight to the Sultan's palace, declared himself the new ruler, and started gathering an army. But here's where Khalid made his first massive mistake. The British had a treaty that said they got to choose who became Sultan. Khalid basically walked up to the British Empire and said, "Yeah, about that treaty, I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist." The British response was swift and terrifying. Consul General Basil Cave, and yes, that was his real name, Basil Cave, which sounds like a villain from a James Bond movie, sent Khalid a very polite British ultimatum. "Dear Khalid, you have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to evacuate the palace and submit to our authority. Sincerely, the people who conquered a quarter of the world." But Khalid, in what can only be described as a spectacular display of overconfidence, decided to double down. He fortified the palace, gathered about 2,800 men, mostly civilians, servants and palace guards, set up some artillery and prepared for war against the British Empire. Let me put this in perspective. Khalid was essentially bringing a knife to a nuclear fight. The British had 3 warships sitting in the harbour, armed with the most advanced naval guns of the era, facing off against a wooden palace and some outdated cannons. As the deadline approached, the British fleet took their positions. The HMS Raccoon, HMS Philomel, and HMS Thrush lined up their guns, while over 1,000 British Marines and sailors prepared for what they assumed would be a quick morning's work. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Khalid was probably having the worst buyer's remorse in history. But it was too late to back down now. He had painted himself into a corner, and the British were about to repaint that corner with cannon fire. The clock ticked toward 9 a.m. The British gave their final warning. Khalid's response? Crickets, complete silence. At exactly 9:02 a.m., Rear Admiral Harry Rawson gave the order that would make history: open fire. What happened next was less a war and more a demolition project with extreme prejudice. The British warships unleashed hell on the Sultan's palace. We're talking about modern naval artillery, guns that could punch through steel, being fired at a building made of wood, coral and wishful thinking. The palace didn't stand a chance. Within minutes, it was a blazing inferno. The Sultan's artillery was silenced almost immediately. His yacht, the HHS Glasgow, tried to fight back and was promptly sent to the bottom of the harbour, where its mast stuck up like a watery gravestone for the next 18 years. The British fired over 1,000 shells in 38 minutes. That's more than 26 shells per minute, or one shell every 2.3 seconds for over half an hour straight. It was like the world's deadliest metronome. The casualties tell the whole story of this mismatch. On the Zanzibar side, approximately 500 dead or wounded. These weren't soldiers, they were mostly civilians who had been caught up in Khalid's delusions of grandeur. The palace guards, the servants, ordinary people who found themselves on the wrong side of the British Empire's morning routine. On the British side, one single wounded sailor, not even killed, just wounded, and he recovered in the hospital. Let that sink in for a moment. In 38 minutes, the ratio was 500 to 1. That's not a war, that's target practice with tragic consequences. At 9:40 a.m., less than 40 minutes after it began, the guns fell silent. Khalid, perhaps finally grasping the magnitude of his error, raised the white flag. But in a final act of cowardice, he didn't face the consequences of his actions. Instead, he fled to the German consulate and begged for asylum. The British, ever practical, installed a new sultan, Hamud bin Mohammed, who immediately got the message loud and clear. His first act? Agreeing to abolish the slave trade completely. Funny how a 38-minute artillery demonstration can change someone's perspective on international law. But the British weren't done. They sent Khalid a bill for the privilege of being destroyed. The invoice? 300,000 rupees to cover the cost of the shells they'd used to demolish his palace, plus damages for the chaos his rebellion had caused. Think about that for a moment. Not only did Khalid lose his bid for power in under 40 minutes, not only did he cause the deaths of 500 people, but he also had to pay for his own destruction. It's like getting charged for the bullet that shot you. Khalid spent the rest of his life in exile, first in German East Africa, then later captured by the British during World War I and exiled to St. Helena, the same island where Napoleon was imprisoned. I'm sure he had plenty of time to reflect on his 38 minutes of infamy. Now, you might be thinking, this is just a story about British imperialism and a foolish sultan. But the Anglo-Zanzibar War represents something much bigger. It was the end of an era in East Africa. The slave trade that had made Zanzibar wealthy for centuries was finished. The traditional power structures that had existed for generations were swept away in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom. This 38-minute war changed the course of East African history. It demonstrated the overwhelming technological superiority of European powers and the futility of resistance with outdated weapons and tactics. It was colonialism in fast forward, a compressed example of what was happening across Africa during the scramble for Africa. What makes this war even more remarkable is that it was thoroughly documented. Unlike many historical conflicts where details are lost to time, the Anglo-Zanzibar War happened in the age of modern record-keeping. We have official British naval logs, photographs of the aftermath, detailed casualty reports, and even the exact timing of when the first and last shots were fired. The British were so efficient that they managed to conduct a complete military campaign including the bombardment, occupation, regime change and installation of a new government, all in less time than it takes to watch a movie. So what can we learn from this 38-minute catastrophe? First, know your enemy. Khalid clearly had no idea what he was up against. The British Empire in 1896 was at the height of its power, with the most advanced military technology in the world. Challenging them with outdated weapons was like bringing a musket to a machine gun fight. Second, timing matters. If Khalid had waited, negotiated or found another way to press his claim, he might have avoided the slaughter. Instead, his impatience led to tragedy. Third, the consequences of leadership decisions ripple far beyond the leader themselves. Khalid's 38-minute war cost 500 lives and changed the course of Zanzibar's history forever. In our age of modern warfare where conflicts can drag on for decades, there's something almost surreal about a war that lasted 38 minutes. It's shorter than most commutes to work, briefer than a lunch break, quicker than a typical TV show. Yet in those 38 minutes, more happened than in months of some modern conflicts. A government fell, a new one was installed, hundreds died, and the course of a nation was permanently altered. It's a reminder that in history, as in life, timing is everything, and sometimes the most dramatic changes happen in the blink of an eye. And that's the incredible true story of the shortest war in history, a 38-minute reminder that when you challenge the British Empire with outdated cannons and wishful thinking, you're going to have a very bad, very short day. What do you think? Could you imagine living through 38 minutes that changed everything? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your thoughts on these wild historical stories. If this story of imperial miscalculation and military mismatch blew your mind, you're going to love what else we have coming up here at the Griot Chronicles. We're diving deep into the most unbelievable, jaw-dropping and downright bizarre stories that history has to offer. From royal scandals that would make reality TV jealous to scientific discoveries that accidentally changed the world, we're bringing you the stories they didn't teach you in school. So smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world's shortest war. Trust me, once you start going down the rabbit hole of historical insanity, there's no going back. Until next time, this is the Griot Chronicles, reminding you that truth really is stranger than fiction, and sometimes it's also a whole lot shorter than you'd expect.